while President Trump meets in his cabinet to decide the future of many things, not the least of which is the Russia-Ukraine war and where it's going in terms of negotiated settlement. Things on the diplomatic front are not moving, at least according to the way he would like. He is frustrated about some things. He's dissatisfied about really everybody involved with this, whether it's the Europeans, the Ukrainians, or the Russians. He seems to be kind of aggravated about how all this is going because I think he has something in mind, and what he has in mind is not working out so far. But as we'll see when we start getting into some of the details, even though he maybe shouldn't be frustrated, he is kind of moving in the right direction, certainly way better than the previous occupant of the Oval Office. And to trying to kind of see what's what about all this stuff, we have Larry Johnson back again, friend of the show, Larry the Shirt Johnson, former CIA officer and the author at Sonar21.com. Larry, welcome back as always.
I am always honored and privileged to be here.
And we're always delighted to have you. I want to start off with that cabinet meeting because literally just minutes before I think the cabinet meeting is still going on, but Gary was able to grab a soundbite from one of the issues that's a little bit puzzling to me, and that's this whole issue of a minerals deal. There was everybody's familiar with that explosion in the Oval Office at the end of February when Zelensky got into an arguing match with Trump and the vice president, but not as many people know that was supposed to have just been basically a photo op so that they would then go and have lunch and then sign this minerals deal. And the pins were already out. The deal was agreed to, et cetera. And that didn't happen, obviously. And then 2 or 3 times after that, it was again supposed to happen. So again today, just moments ago, one of the reporters asked this.
Is it true that the Ukraine minerals deal is about to be signed in the next 24 hours or so? There's some reports saying that. And if it's true, has the deal changed at all from the last time we heard about it?
Well, I'll ask Scott to answer the question because he's responsible for it.
Yeah, our side's ready to sign. Ukrainians decided last night to make some last-minute changes. We're sure that they will reconsider that, and we are ready to sign this afternoon if they are.
Can you talk about those last-minute changes? What was removed or put in its place?
Nothing's been removed. It's the same agreement that we agreed to on the weekend. No changes on our side.
Okay, so that was a little odd. First of all, he said it may be signed tonight, but last night Zelensky had some changes, and then he ended by saying, no, there wasn't any changes. It's the same agreement. Well, wait, was there changes or not? And what do you make of this whole minerals deal anyway?
Yes. Look, they've been pushing this grift since the end of February. We've gone all the way through March, all the way now, last day of April, and now they're saying they're going to get it signed on May 1st. I ain't holding my breath. If they want the quote rare earth minerals, the reality is, Danny, we got them all here in Florida. There's a company called Mosaic Mining. They're just about 30 minutes from my house, 45 minutes, some of their mines. They got these tailings, all this stuff that they take out of the ground and they pile up as waste. That all has those rare earth minerals in it. The problem is processing it. So Ukraine may have, quote, all these rare earth minerals, but they don't have the processing plants. So without the processing facilities, it's just, dust and dirt until you process it. So I frankly, I don't think Bessett and this crew, they don't even know what they're doing.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's all this valuable commodity in the ground just waiting to be extracted, why was it never extracted before? I mean, did Ukraine not want money? I mean, why has this not been done up to this point?
Well, the expense, the cost required to invest in the processing plant is such that then once you get it, you will have a certain cost level. Well, China can just drop. China already has those plants in place. They're already producing the final rare earth mineral products that can be used by manufacturers. If they've got a competitor, all they do is just drop the price and undersell them, undercut them. So it's financially hasn't been a viable economic proposition. That's why.
And then of course, then the question is, I guess somebody just put a bug in Trump's ear that there's all this money to be had, and so now that he just made that this important thing here, which is oddly enough also kind of disconnected from all these negotiations and where this is going, except that if the Ukraine side doesn't still exist at the end of the day, then there's not any deal to be had because it'll be under Russian control.
Right. This Russia is accelerating its military advance all along the line of contact that extends now from Sumy, Kharkiv in the north, then comes down through Donetsk and Luhansk, and then it extends into Zaporizhia. And so when you got Sumy and Kharkiv, which right now, they're not part of Russia. They're still considered part of Ukraine. It is highly likely that by the end of July, the Sumy and Kharkiv will be entirely under Russian control. And, Russia can use it as a bargaining chip, but you also can't rule out the possibility of those two oblasts going through the same process that Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson did by having a referendum, internationally supervised, where they will say, you know what, we want to rejoin Russia. We don't want to be part of this Ukrainian club anymore. So, that's one of the things that is out on the horizon. Trump is laboring under this delusion that he's going to persuade the Russians to allow the United States to take control of, say, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Ain't going to happen. Not in a million years.
Yeah, Lavrov almost laughed when they asked him that question. He literally did. So he's like, yeah, no, we're good with taking care of it. We don't need any help.
Yeah.
So don't know what that was. And I don't know whether that was Trump or General Kellogg came up with that brilliant idea. We'll have to find out about that later. But Trump is, though, a little bit frustrated about a lot of things. And a lot of that has to do with expectation management.
Mm-hmm.
And Caroline Levitt, a couple of days ago, gave voice to it.
He thinks that he is increasingly frustrated with leaders of both countries. He wants to see a permanent ceasefire. I understand Vladimir Putin this morning offered a temporary ceasefire. The president has made it clear he wants to see a permanent ceasefire, first to stop the killing, stop the bloodshed. And while he remains optimistic he can strike a deal, he's also being realistic as well. And both leaders need to come to the table to negotiate their way out of this. And I do think that the president, meeting with President Zelensky, shows that he is exuding a lot of effort and time into this because he wants to be a peacemaker president.
Okay, several things to unpack from here. One version is that Trump is he's not tied in with what's really going on, and he thinks that he can have a deal, and he thinks that he's close, but he's going to be disappointed. The second possibility is that he knows good and well he's not going to get an idea, and he's just laying the groundwork to be able to walk away, possibly between now and the 9th of May. How do you see it?
Well, I see it. I think Trump is refusing to take responsibility for his role in creating this mess. He likes to pretend, you've heard him say, this is Joe Biden's war and Barack Obama's war. Like he had nothing to do with it. Well, the facts say otherwise. When I did the third part of my series on the Ukraine's role with NATO and U.S. European command exercises, going back to 1992. It was in 2017, which was, who was president then? Oh, that would be Donald Trump. From 2017 until 2021, the Ukrainian armed forces grew under Donald Trump's 4 years in office by a factor of 3.6 to be precise. They went from a combined active duty and reserve force of around 320 to a combined active duty reserve force of 1.2 million. That was under Donald Trump. Under Donald Trump, the military exercises, particularly Operation Seabreeze in the Black Sea, turned to doing anti-submarine warfare. That's how it's titled in the exercise. And amphibious warfare, which meant Marines were landing and landing craft on the beaches of Ukraine in the Black Sea shore. In September of 2020, as part of these exercises, for the first time, the United States flew B-52 bombers along the Crimean coast. So I frankly don't want to hear any crap out of Donald Trump about how this is Joe Biden's war. I had nothing to do with it. He had everything to do with it, with preparing and equipping the Ukrainians as a military force for the express purpose of attacking Russia. Now, maybe in December of 2021, he might have negotiated the deal that Vladimir Putin offered, taken it, and they would have avoided war. I can't rule that out. But you know what? Right now, Donald Trump can pull the plug on this aggression that the United States provoked Russia into. And he refuses to do so far. And he thinks he can get a deal out of Putin. And Putin and Lavrov have made it very, very clear. There's no permanent ceasefire until every Ukrainian soldier is out of Russian territory, which they define as Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk. That is number one. And this Nazi crew, this Nazi ideology that underlies the entire Ukrainian government, that has to be eradicated. That's got to be removed. Constitutionally can't be there. And without that, we will take care of this militarily. We will end this militarily. That's their position. And Trump doesn't want to acknowledge that.
And in fact, Gary, I'm going to skip that first Lavrov we were going to show because it just repeats some of the same thing. But I do want to go to the second one here because in an interview with I think it was O Globo, O Globo in Brazil yesterday, Lavrov was very, very explicit on what he said is the terms that he'll willing to make a deal on.
The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has listed terms, telling a Brazilian newspaper that international recognition of Crimea and 4 other eastern Ukrainian regions annexed by Russia is imperative, demilitarizing Ukraine, lifting sanctions on Russia, cancelling arrest warrants, and unfreezing Russian assets in the West are also on the agenda, Lavrov added, while Russia will insist on security guarantees to shield it from NATO and European Union threats.
So the bottom line is he said the same thing that Putin said on June 14th of last summer, the same thing that, and we showed this earlier in the week, that Putin said on the 24th of February, 2022. They have been absolutely consistent across the board. And so if Trump thinks that they're getting close to negotiation, and Lavrov explicitly said, all of our terms have to be accepted or there won't be a ceasefire. They'll, as you just put it, they'll just be continued offensive operations. So Putin said, you don't really need to be frustrated, or Lavrov is, because here's the deal and you can take it or leave it. Yeah.
No, I mean, just listen to what they say. I heard that from Lavrov just sitting across the table from him 7 weeks ago, first week of March. So the Russians have adjusted their position based upon what the West does. And when they adjust it, they make it tougher. So you go back to March of 2022, when the Ukrainians showed up at negotiations with a proposed deal, and the Russians essentially accepted it. It would have limited the size of Ukraine's military, but it allowed Donetsk and Luhansk to remain as part of Ukraine, but it would have been a special relationship so that they would the rights of the Russian speakers would be protected. Russia was willing to sign off on that. When Boris Johnson at Joe Biden's direction shows up and they cancel the deal, walk away from it, the Ukrainians do. Russia then said, okay. So then went and held elections in the 4 oblasts, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk. And all the people said, yeah, we want to join Russia. Okay, you're now part of Russia. And now on June 14th, as you noted in 2024, Putin said, all right, here's our terms now. We got four new parts of our country. They ain't going anywhere. And in addition, you're going to have to dismantle your Nazi and neo-Nazi ideology in Ukraine. I mean, so they got tougher. If the West does not accept this deal now, I guarantee you that the next deal that they'll negotiate on is, okay, you're also going to recognize Dnipropetrovsk, Poltava, Sumy, Kharkiv as Russian territory, as is Odessa.
Yeah, or they may say they're actually, we're not going to negotiate anything. We're just going to take it all because you can't stop us. Right. I mean, I think that's when we had Commodore Steve Jeremy on earlier today, who's just, I mean, like nearly all of the experts we have on here, certainly including you, you're like, if you just do a basic military analysis, a balance of power assessment, I mean, it's clear beyond any recognition what the outcome of this is going to be. It almost can't be anything else. And although you could have figured that out earlier, you certainly could figure it out after the first 3 years of the war. And yet, here is Fareed Zakaria on CNN, who's taken issue with some of the deals that Trump is trying to get because they're too good to Ukraine, to Putin.
What isn't getting discussed is what Ukraine needs to stop fighting is some kind of security guarantee, both from outside countries and also the ability to build and maintain a very powerful army. If it doesn't have those security guarantees, Anderson, it's not going to stop fighting. These guys are fighting for their country, for their freedom, for their independence, for their lives. They're not going to just, even Donald Trump, no matter how powerful the American president is, will not be able to order the Ukrainians to sign their extinction as a nation. They won't accept that.
I mean, come on, Larry. If you don't accept that, then the only alternative is the military alternative, where you lose everything, not just some of your freedoms. You lose all of it. You might even lose the whole country. I mean, what could be in the mentality of these otherwise intelligent people? I mean, Zakaria is not an idiot. He's not a stooge. I mean, he's got a long history of being right on some things, and he's usually very studied. But, I mean, he genuinely doesn't seem to get it.
Yeah, so since he's the doctor, a physician, we just need to explain it to him in medical terms. Fareed, if I plug your nose and your mouth, how's your breathing going to be? Oh, I'll die. Exactly. And you know what? Ukraine does not, once the United States stops supplying intelligence, stops supplying weapons and ammunition, that's the same as having your mouth and nose covered and you can't breathe through them. Do you understand? Oh, maybe that makes sense. This notion, and I saw it, I think it was when you did your interview with Andrei Martyanov yesterday, and you played a clip from Kellogg, and you talked about it being, quote, a stalemate, and not paying attention to the actual progress. So everybody watching or listening, get on ChatGPT or a Perplexity AI, pick your favorite artificial intelligence search engine and type in, please provide the list of cities, towns, and villages that Ukraine has taken and held. Your important is held from Russia since January of 2024. And then put in the same search, but flip it so that Russia has taken and held since January 2024. The answer is Ukraine, 0. For Russia, dozens. And it's all been, and these are significant takes, where Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Toretsk, they've now, it looks like they've all got Chasiv Yar surrounded. They've retaken all of the Kursk region and all of the towns and villages in that area. They're moving into areas in Kharkiv and Sumy, in Zaporizhia. So don't tell me stalemate. That's not a stalemate. And this kind of self-delusion is been perpetrated in this country, where you get a lot of Americans, they listen to someone like Fareed Zakaria and say, oh yeah, so man, Ukraine still has a chance. No, they don't. They have no chance.
Well, see, that's exactly the point. Because when people hear that, they think, well, he's an intellectual guy and he's a smart guy, so he's not going to say that unless obviously there's a chance. But yet, I mean, I literally don't see any chance, not at all. I mean, I'm talking way off the charts of no chance. Not even like, well, I mean, if everything fell into place, there's not anything like that.
Yeah.
But you see, I mean, he must be, Zakaria must be listening to other people, because, and you mentioned that those thoughts we played on Martyanov. I'm going to play one for you here because it's even more poignant than the one that you cited there a second ago from General Kellogg, where he's looking at the Russian side specifically.
Russia's not winning this war. Russia has not made any major advances in the last year and a half. They haven't taken the city of Kyiv, the capital. They haven't pushed to the west of the Dnieper River, which is a major obstacle. They haven't taken Odessa. They've lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and they haven't really moved anything. It moves by meters, not by miles. And the Ukrainians are fighting on their own soil. They're fighting hard. So when Russia says they're winning, no, they're not. If they are winning, they've already won this war after 3 years, and now we're into our 4th year.
So does he believe that, or is he just saying it for, I don't know, marketing purposes?
Marketing. I mean, I'd like to know, did he ever command in Afghanistan or Iraq?
I don't believe he did. I think he's a Vietnam guy.
But if he got out after that, I'd like to see, go back and find out if he made any claims of our great victories in Vietnam. He is, he's trying to create a standard. And then I think Andre explained it very eloquently, that the Russian objective here is not, quote, taking territory. They are taking territory. You can, visually see it on the map. And it's not just a few meters here and a few meters there, but it's also Russia is destroying Ukraine's ability to fight.
Yeah.
And in the process, I don't know if they set this out as their original objective, but it certainly has become a serendipitous benefit that they are disarming, destroying NATO. NATO's military power is being exposed as a hollow shell and has very limited capability now. And they can't really field an army. It goes back to what the concept that the Germans supposedly want to put troops up in the Baltics, or Russia's manpower that's now active, not just reserves, active, is 1.5 million. And of that, 600,000-700,000 are on the front lines, with the other 600,000-700,000 in reserve. And they're being rotated in and rotated out. They're getting combat experience. Russia's under no timeline. This is not like World War II, where they were literally fighting for the survival of their country. They were, and time mattered, because they were facing an attack, dangerous attacking force in the Germans. They've got, if you will, sort of the luxury of time that they can build up, and now they can focus the resources. And it's more like a big old snake strangling its prey. That's what's going on.
And then you also look at the other side. So that's the U.S. from the military members, from the members of the media or the intelligentsia. But then you also have from the Ukraine side, you have Brother Zelensky himself. Now, I mentioned a minute ago about how he is, for reasons that don't make any sense to me, has tried to change the terms of this mineral deals, has not wanted to sign it. I guess a little bit makes sense because he doesn't want to give it away, although I don't know that he has anything to give away, so it's probably not going to make any difference anyway. But in terms of the war here, he still really, like Zakaria, like what Kellogg is saying, whether he believes it or not, he still thinks that there's a chance to do something, and he's trying to demand things of both the West and Russia.
Важливо і надалі тиснути на російські мережі впливу, а також на всі їхні виробництва та торгівельні операції. Готуємось також і до розмови з Америкою щодо нових санкційних кроків. Обираємо саме такі больові точки Росії, які найбільше спонукатимуть Москву до дипломатії. Вони повинні робити чіткі кроки до завершення війни. І ми наполягаємо, що безумовне і повне припинення вогню має стати першим кроком. Росія повинна це зробити. Зараз вони переживають, що у них парад під питанням. І правильно переживають.
Okay, I'm going to get to that part about May 9th in just a second, but let's just camp for a second on his comments there that he will insist that Russia agree to a complete and total and unconditional ceasefire, and then we'll talk about peace. In light of what Lavrov said earlier in this episode we showed, reconcile those two things for me.
Irreconcilable. You know, this is Ukraine is in no position to dictate. If Ukraine was still moving forward in Kursk and had Russian units surrounded, and Russian military units were surrendering, and Russian cities were on fire, and Russian manufacturing plants were smoldering ruins, then he might have some leverage in this process. But none of that's true. In fact, it is his plants that are smoldering in ruins. He's the one lacking in manpower. He's the one lacking in supplies. He's the one with no air capability to speak of. Russia has air superiority right now, headed towards supremacy. So on every single item of substance with respect to military action, there's not a single area in which Ukraine is equal to or superior to the Russian capabilities. So it's just you've heard a definite change of tune from Putin over the last 2-3 weeks, where he's talking about, basically they can see the end in sight now. They've recognized that their position in terms of from a military standpoint is such that they will crush Ukraine.
Yeah, I think it was on I want to say the 25th of this month when he was congratulating Gerasimov for having driven Ukraine out of the Kursk operation, that whole thing to drive them back into the Ukraine side. And at the end, he said, this has set the conditions for the complete destruction of the Ukraine regime.
Yes.
He didn't say anything about a negotiated settlement. He said the destruction of the regime. That's the first time I've heard him say that in quite a long time, since maybe the first. So that seemed to change. I agree with you.
Well, and we need to recognize that there is no negotiated solution for this war, because this war was provoked by the United States, and particularly with the full collaboration of key NATO members, particularly the United Kingdom, the Germans, the Poles, and the French. And this move of NATO to the east to threaten Russia, most people don't realize that in Yavoriv, that military base in western Ukraine that was described as a Ukrainian military base was actually a NATO base. It was established as a NATO facility in 2007, even though it had been used as a training site prior to that. The reality is Ukraine has been a de facto member of NATO since at least 2007, and I think you could even make a case to go back to 2005. The only thing it didn't have was an Article 5 guarantee and a financial obligation to kick in some money every month. Other than that, I don't know if you had a chance to read that my 3-part series that I did on this. During that decade from 2000 to 2010, I looked to see which countries hosted the most NATO exercises. Now, And by 2004, there were a total of 28 countries in NATO. And the answer I got back shocked me, because the number 6 most popular country for hosting NATO exercises was Ukraine. Number 7 was Georgia. Wait a second. Neither Ukraine or Georgia are even NATO members. Yet they're hosting more exercises for NATO and the U.S. European Command than Italy, Spain, Portugal, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Denmark, go down the list, Hungary, that Ukraine was the most popular spot. So this thing, look, this is part of a long-term plan. And where I think Russia's going is this use of NATO exercises on our borders is going to stop. And yet right now we're seeing indications that NATO is trying to intensify those exercises on the border. And I think that could definitely become a flashpoint for Russia.
Yeah. And in fact, I want to get to that in just a second, but I want to hit real quick the end of that comment that we just showed from Zelensky, to where he implied that this may not parade the coming up, the victory celebration at the end of the Great Patriotic War from the Russian side. Maybe there would be some missiles and something flying. He said there's probably good reason for them to say that. And actually, one of our viewers, Nikos, earlier in the show, he seems to think that they will do that. He's that insane. Others have suggested, nah, he's not that dumb. I mean, it's just a gimmick and a ploy. He certainly wouldn't do that. But would he? Well, I mean, what do you think? Would he actually attempt to do that?
Yeah, I think he probably will. But Russia is prepared to defend against it, and will actually take preemptive measures to deal with that threat. So, they understand what's at risk. Zelensky, if he does that, though, he'll be committing suicide, because an attack that includes an attack on the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping will be in attendance, other members of Europe, Robert Fico of Slovakia, Orban in Hungary. All of a sudden, and Lula of Brazil.
Yeah.
This would be and on a civilian parade. It was not this is not a military parade per se. This is a commemoration of the victory.
The parade itself obviously is military, but there'd be tens of thousands of civilians there in attendance. So let me ask you a question on that, because here, what is it? I guess a week or so ago, on the 25th, and to be specific, on the 25th of April, when Steve Witkoff went to Moscow, was going to meet with Vladimir Putin again. On that same day, Ukraine chose to assassinate another Russian general, which happened also in December of last year, so not long ago. And yet, what you have not seen is for Russia to be assassinating Ukrainian leaders in Kiev. Why do you suppose that the Russians have not taken that kind of tit-for-tat action?
If you will, they're not going to lower themselves to that level. They go after the perpetrators. Even they caught the guy who planted the bomb and placed the car bomb there, and he's arrested. He's being put on trial. And Russia actually, even for this, they don't have the death penalty for crimes like this. So I think they're sending a signal that we're not savages, we're civilized. And we'll deal.
Oh no,
with
that's not possible. Putin is evil. He's like Hitler. I don't know if you saw that memo.
Yeah. Well, he didn't get the memo. It's just the cartoon caricature that we have created in the West of Vladimir Putin as this evil monster is just it's a lie. It's a piece of propaganda, but you notice that Russia has, again, they've intensified their military campaign against Ukraine. And they've gone after and hit some targets that have, they're causing significant damage, not just to the Ukrainians, but They've killed a bunch of Polish mercenaries and British mercenaries over the course of the last week. This war will end on military terms, and Russia will dictate those terms. It's that simple.
Well, it's only that simple because we are making it so. Because
Yeah.
we're unwilling to take the diplomatic off-ramp that's been offered at any of the diplomatic off-ramps. This is just, I perceive, and maybe you agree as well, this is the last diplomatic opportunity there'll be. I don't think there'll be another offer. I think that once if they start going down this path, it's going to be until they have achieved on the ground what they want, and then they'll just tell you what's left. That's how I see it.
Well, no, I don't disagree with you at all on that. And if I was, if I went back, more than a month and a half ago, and Mr. Lavrov had asked me what would be your advice, my advice was don't trust the West at all. You settle.
I think he's gotten that part already.
Yeah, settle this militarily. Force your terms on them, and don't accept any kind of make no concessions, because any concession you make will make they'll view that as just weakness on your part. You may be thinking you're making a humanitarian gesture. They interpret it as weakness. So don't trust them.
And and one of the things that just continues to erode the trust is you mentioned a minute ago something about the Germans. I want to talk about that in the last few minutes we have here, because if the comments of Kellogg are irrational to me, if the mentality exposed by Fareed Zakaria just is detached from reality, and obviously Zelensky's is detached from reality too, I might be tempted to think, okay, well, those are some of the outliers, but the remainder, the bulk of it, will understand, of Europe especially, the war is over, it's lost, and it's going to have an ugly ending, whether it's negotiated here or fought for with there, but then it's going to be over. And so you would think that, all right, well, let's just worry about getting our house in order. But instead, you have the Germans, who have a lot of economic issues of their own, by the way, among the worst in Europe, their performance, all of these boomerang sanctions that we put on Russia have come back to hurt Germany, maybe worse than any other single European country.
Right.
But now then, here is a video that was released yesterday from the Ministry of Defense in Lithuania about what the Germans are about to do.
We have a clear mission as the German brigade, as the Panzerbrigade 45, the Armored Brigade 45 here in Lithuania, and that is the defense of Lithuania, defense of NATO territory. And we are not doing it alone as a German brigade. There's an entire German division behind, which is really allocated for the defense of this very region here in the Baltics, here in Lithuania. And that's very, I would say, reassuring. We are really taking it very seriously from the German side, and I'm sure but also the other allies are really taking that seriously. We are following our political orders as agreed by our heads of state and government. We are here to defend every inch of NATO territory here in Lithuania.
Now, moving that kind of combat power forward up into the Baltics, close to the actual Russian border. I mean, I want to look at this from a couple of different aspects, but I know you're very tied into a lot of things on the Russian side. There is NATO, which is one issue, but then there's German mechanized forces, which seem to have a different level of emotion. I wonder if you can explain that.
Yeah. 1 in 12 citizens of Russia died when the Germans attacked Russia, the Soviet Union, back in June of 1940. And that they haven't forgotten. I mean, they suffered. Almost every single family lost a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, some family member. And in many cases, the entire families were wiped out, with the exception of one or two. So the idea of Germans coming back to the borders of Russia, and the Russians aren't going to do anything, that's just that's insanity. And the fact that this German officer is so clueless about this is, part of the problem. Look, the Russians have largely ignored Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia because they're so tiny. Do you realize that the New York borough of Brooklyn, in terms of population, is bigger than Latvia, is bigger than Estonia and is the same size as Lithuania. Okay? So we're talking about maybe a grand total between all three countries of 6 million. They couldn't even fill up all of New York City, for God's sake.
And the cumulative total of combat power is just a handful of battalions.
It's a police force,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's, you know, Russia's not losing sleep over that. What they were losing sleep over, though, was they watched year after year, particularly after 2014, when NATO threw Russia out. You know, Russia thwarted NATO's plans to take control of Sevastopol. And they excluded them from the exercises and then began conducting a minimum of 4 to 5 military exercises every year, joint exercises with NATO and or U.S. troops. And they were conducting them in Ukraine. These were not being conducted some faraway place. These were exercises that involved Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian officers. And, you know, they saw this NATO buildup, and the army was increasing, as I pointed out earlier. This all took place under Donald Trump. And so, you know, the Russian general staff is sitting there watching, why are they building up a reserve force of 900,000? You know, they've tripled that now in the last 9 years. Actually, they tripled it in the last 3 years, candidly. And then, you know, the rhetoric that was going on, and then the increased attacks from the Ukrainian army into civilian areas in Donetsk and Luhansk. And when Putin presented Joe Biden with a peace deal in December of 2021, and Biden initially said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we could probably do it," and then we got back, and Blinken and all the others said, "Hell no, you're not going to do that." And then Lavrov met with Blinken in January of 2022 and said, "Hey, you know, we've got a real concern about these missiles that you're bringing in to put at bases in Poland and Romania, because that's on our border." And Blinken said, "It's none of your goddamn business. We'll do what we want." So that's why I say this. It wasn't that the Russian, you know, Putin woke up one morning and didn't have his morning coffee or failed to have a good constitutional, who knows, and just says, "You know, I'm upset with the Ukraine. I think we'll launch an attack. Let's do it." No. This was, they were provoked to it, and the initial stage of the military operation, as you pointed out before, was designed to bring pressure to get negotiations underway, which it did. And then the United States sabotaged that.
Yeah.
So the United States has been the problem in this throughout. And here's Donald Trump pretending, "Oh, we're the great mediator. All these other people, boy, they've been the crazy ones. We're there. We got blood on our hands, blood on our clothes. You know, the knives dripping with blood, and we're going, who killed this guy? You know, we're responsible."
So let me ask you a question, though. There are elements inside the Russian military that I've been reading on some of their media, some of their Telegram channels, etc., that are saying, "Hey, we aren't going to trust the West with anything, and we should take advantage of the opportunity we got right now," because, as you just mentioned, there's 1.5 million total active forces, which means they now have various levels of substantial to pretty good combat experience and modern knowledge. They're equipped with the ways of the modern warfare, and the West is not. And then you see that there was right now there was a desire to have like 64,000 assurance force people, whatever, for this coalition of the willing. And now it's turned out an analysis saying, well, they'll be hard pressed to cobble together more than about 25,000. Europe is going to be hard pressed to come up with that many in terms of an assurance force, that they would have some kind of whatever defense against or coalition to deter Russia, right? And then now that you see here, Germany wants to move 5,000 into this really thin strip of land here in the Baltics. Might that not tempt some people in Russia to say, look, even if forget about the Ukraine war, that's going to end one way or the other. but we got to make sure our whole western flank is secured. And if you guys are moving combat power in, this might be the time to act when you can't do anything about it. And if we had to go toe to toe, we could take you out and seal that whole thing on the west. Is there any risk of that?
Oh yeah, tremendous risk of that. And then you have to add into the threats that are being made against Russian shipping in the Baltic Sea. That there are calls from several of these insane people to shut down and prevent Russia from being able to use Kaliningrad, for example. I guess it used to be called Königsberg. It was a German, it was sort of one of the headquarters for Prussia before Prussia became Germany. But the NATO, the non-U.S. members of NATO are increasing their strident rhetoric and are willing to provoke a war, it would look like. And, Russia is prepared. I believe Russia's prepared for that contingency now. And they fully recognize it as a possibility. That's why they're hoping that they can secure a deal with the United States. That, once U.S. is out of the picture, Europe can't do anything. Europe has no power. Europe thinks it does.
Yeah.
But they don't have the military industrial base to produce and sustain troops in the field, to sustain action. Just their line of communication for the resupply is not there. And they can't just, this is not Dorothy from Wizard of Oz clicking her heels together and making 3 wishes. That's not going to put artillery shells in their hands.
Nope, or put them on target either. But
yeah.
Well, listen, we hope that the worst that can be avoided here, because not only could this be more catastrophic for Ukraine, it could also be catastrophic for Europe. Because look, Russia conventionally, there's no question they could obliterate the Baltics with or without this German contingent in there. There's no problem. This is Suwalki Gap, which is a bottleneck that Russia could close off with the greatest of ease, and then they would all be trapped behind there and then systematically taken out. That's not a problem. The issue is, because there are Article 5 guarantees up in that area, you have the potential for nuclear escalation. And that's what it is shocking to me, that we're even contemplating that anyone in Europe is contemplating that. It doesn't seem like Trump is, but some others in Europe seem to be willing to monkey around with some of that. And that just baffles me beyond any kind of comprehension, and what needs to be avoided at all costs.
Well, and let's not forget, it was Trump who walked away from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, INF agreement. And that, Russia had been abiding by it. But once that agreement was abrogated, what did Russia do? They turned around and developed the Oreshnik missile, which is an intermediate range ballistic missile that would have been illegal and prohibited under the INF treaty. Now, all of Europe faces the possibility of, they're in the range of that missile. It is a new type of hypersonic missile. It's maneuverable, and they can't stop it. So, Russia's got a lot of cards in its deck that it can play, and Europe doesn't.
Yeah, and we don't need to find out. We don't need to see those cards played. That's what we need to do. We need to keep them in the hand, because everybody can win if we just shut up. We can just end this situation here on the least ugly terms available, and then get back on with living life, because that's possible. We can start the process of normalizing. It'll take a long time, maybe even a couple of decades, but at least during that time, tensions are lowering over a period of time. But if we keep going down this stupid path, it could get hot in a hurry, and everybody's going to lose at that point.
Well, and then you got the other, what makes it so bizarre is that there's not a single leader, at least between Germany, France, and England, that has majority support, popular support of the people. They've all been elected with minority constituencies. So, Giorgia Meloni, I guess she's close to having, she did have a popular, got more than a plurality of the votes. Orban did, he got a majority. Fico did in Slovakia. But that kind of fragmentation means these people are really making decisions that don't even reflect the will of their people. And there's growing indications that the average citizen is waking up going, wait a second. We don't want to go to war with Russia.
Yeah, the people don't. That's for sure. The people don't. At least the majorities of them in all these places. And gracious, yeah, that's I certainly agree with that. That you stop the weapon supply and you'll see how fast they negotiate. I agree with that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, pull the plug.
We'll have to see how that's going to work out here. But as always, we're really grateful for your insights here, especially the fact that you've sat down with Lavrov before. So you know probably better than most of the guests we have on here what the Russians really think and what they need to hear to stop it going any further. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, just listen to what they say. You know, they're not like Western politicians. They're not lying when their lips move. They're actually telling you what they think.
Yeah, that's probably the problem, because we're like, well, they assume that they're doing the same as we are. So they must not be telling the truth, but we'll see what's going to be. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you guys for watching too. Always appreciate you. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done it. Even if you're one of our members, be sure and hit that like button. It honestly helps spread this message more than you may realize because of all the algorithms and whatever. So you can really help us out by doing that. You can also hit that join button. That also helps us out in ways that you may not realize. And that button right there on go to the homepage there and hit that join button, because that can really help us. And by the way, just kind of a little teaser. We got a show coming up next week that you are not going to want to miss. It is maybe one of the bigger guests that we've ever had on the show. That's saying a lot, because we've had a lot of great people like Larry the Sure Johnson, for example. So if it's even bigger than that, you're not going to want to miss that. More on that as we get into the first part of next week. But you hitting the join button kind of helps us do stuff like that. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.